Well, welcome. We're happy you could be with us today. Eike, it's great to see you again. And we're going to talk about a number of things today, but I thought we would start about 6 or 7 years ago at the Milken Institute Global Conference. We had a discussion on a report that talked about the 10 challenges for the world and society in the first half of the 21st century. And Dr. Gary Becker, on the panel with a group of Nobel Prize winners, reviewed that list of 10, which included terrorism and food and water and a number of other areas. And in that discussion concluded that there really wasn't 10, there was really just 2. One being energy, that would take care of water, would take care of food and a number of other areas. And the other being education. And the education of your citizens would take care of things such as terrorism and other issues long term. So today we have the good fortune, Eike, of spending some time, and you've obviously been very focused on those challenges for the world and your investments in energy, infrastructure, etc. In 2000, at the Global Conference, we put out a list of a discussion of where the world was going in terms of the economy, and looked at today. If we look at today, the world's economy, the U.S. is about 23.6% of the world's economy, China 8.7%, and so on. And the projections of the Milken Institute and others at the time had Brazil growing to 4th in the world after China, the U.S., India, and Brazil as the 4th largest economy in the world. If we want to reflect on that period going back a couple hundred years in 1820, China and India were once again the 2 largest economies in the world, almost 45% of the world's economy. The U.S. was 1.8% of the world's economy at that time. So when we juxtapose these 10 challenges for the world's economy, and juxtapose the potential solutions for them of energy and education, and juxtapose the projected enormous growth of Brazil, Eike, it looks like you're at the right place at the right time.
Yes, Michael, well, first, thank you for having me here. You're a reference for, I probably wouldn't be here if with the creation of junk bonds in the early, 30 years now, you helped small companies exist. Well, so thank you very much for having me here.
And we helped them to grow to be big companies, right?
Many, we transformed really the financial world. But yes, Brazil, with all the oil that the country has discovered and all the other resources, you need to build a massive infrastructure really to take it all out and export it in an efficient way. And we are engaged in that massive build-out of this infrastructure. So we have a combination of gigantic resources, the size that America maybe had in the turn of the century, at today's prices, which is great. And obviously, one of Brazil's bottlenecks is exactly infrastructure. We are right now having our inflation numbers are increasing because we have to debottleneck certain things, and one of the so-called Brazil cost is infrastructure.
So I think when we think about it, until recent years with Li Ka-shing and others focusing on ports and issues like that, we often did not really focus on infrastructure. And the idea that if Brazil's economy is going to grow, if the world's economy is going to grow, we're going to have to be able to move goods from point A to point B. And it's been very interesting seeing that the largest trading partner of Brazil is now China versus the United States. How have you adjusted to that, and how are you making your investments going forward based on that issue?
Yeah, well, as you know, Brazil, God gave us all these resources, and China, for which you need a gigantic market. So if I add India to it, so if South America, and I would include Colombia also, because we're also very active in Colombia. So between Brazil and Colombia, two countries that have, respect to contracts, assets that you have, concessions that you have granted are grandfathered. Meaning, so if my 10 billion barrels of oil that we found, if you'd probably been in another country, people would eventually think about, Jesus, this happened here with Standard Oil, no? With Rockefeller. Once you grow too big, things change on you. And, I'm happy to live today in a democracy and where contracts are respected. So my 10.8 billion barrels of oil that we found in shallow waters need obviously massive infrastructure to be taken out. So we're building a gigantic shipyard, we're building a gigantic port to then ship it, to Brazil, for the internal consumption, but also to the world through a gigantic, we're building superports. Can we show a picture of a superport? Yeah?
I think, Eike, one of the things that strikes me is you almost singularly have built these things. Now, there's many other people in Brazil, there's many other organizations in the world. Why do you believe that you, more than anyone else, have focused on building this? There were other individuals at a time that had more capital than you did, but you've had the vision without a great deal of competition in this area.
Yeah, thanks God, Brazil, the international markets of Americans are just awakening up to Brazil now. So thank you. You allowed me to take all the positions, the important ones. Very kind of you.
You like them coming in at tenfold where you came in, is that correct? Rather than...
Voila.
But it still might be a very good investment today.
Absolutely. I mean, we can show you some numbers, but maybe I should show you the background of the... Do we have my moon landing machine here?
Well, while they're pulling up your moon landing machine, you talked about something that's really important as we look at governments around the world. And in the United States, up until probably 1960, 1970, probably 80% of every well drilled in the world was drilled in the United States. And we could talk about why, but you had property rights. You knew if you discovered it, you would own it. You had mineral rights. Many countries, if you own the land, you don't own the mineral rights associated with that land. And so I remember buying Brazil's debt at 40 cents on the dollar in the mid-'80s, and I think many of us who were investing in Brazil in the 70s and 80s knew the difficulties with significant inflation that was occurring. But for the last 15, 16 years, you've had strong government leadership. What caused that to change? What caused that to bring stability to the country?
I guess we were totally broken. And, when Fernando Henrique came into power in '94, he created the zero inflation program, and we had very stable initial 8 years. We went through a TARP process, bank reform in '97 with adult supervision. Today, Brazil's central bank, at the end of the day, knows the exposure of derivatives of all the banking system every single day at the end of the day. So, no leverage, total control of the financial institutions, which is very important. And the surprise to you and even to us Brazilians was that President Lula was, say, the left. We didn't know if he was going to be a populist left or a communist left. And this was 2002. And so, he surprised not only you, but us Brazilians also. In reality, it's only I think, as a Brazilian, I can tell you that thanks God I decided to invest my money in Brazil, because I went around the world, and Brazil's jurisdiction for resources was always fantastic. So this is important. But so when President Lula came on and basically, understood that respect to contracts, grandfathered existing contracts that had another 20, 30-year life, all this transformed Brazil. So, and he kept it on not for the first years, but for 8 years. Fiscal discipline with the exception of the last year, where, election years, he overspent, and that's why we have this slightly up in our inflation numbers. But Dilma, again, countries have to have a certain luck when they have the candidates, and thanks God, Dilma, who worked under President Lula, she was a Margaret Thatcher type, very good managerial executive. And that's what she's doing. She will continue to cut costs, and she will preserve President Lula's legacy, which was, give Brazilians, because through inflation control, you don't have the inflation eat up the wealth of the people who work. So in President Lula 8 years, he made Brazilians have a 40% increase in the real purchase power. And that has meant, bringing 35 million Brazilians into the middle class, which stands now at 100 million Brazilians. So out of a 200 million people, 100 million in the middle class, creating 200,000 jobs per month now, so almost 2.5 million jobs a year. It's like you had it here in the good years, in the very good years. And we still have the pent-up process for another 50 million to come into this middle-class arena, consumption arena, in the next 10 years. So you have a very clear 10-year growth history here. Just the number on domestic consumption here, growth, 8% a year, because you have demand. I mean, this is the basic for growth. So Lula and Dilma, we're lucky. We're lucky. When people ask me about other countries in South America, Venezuela is what it is. Argentina went populist. Peru probably has to exercise the left still. And we have now 16 years of an incredible government with all the right concepts, fiscal discipline, surpluses. I think Americans would love to have a surplus today, no?
Well, so we could step back in the late 1990s during the Asian crisis, which really started in Thailand and then spread throughout. We had a feeling in the world that looked at all of Asia similarly. And obviously the education levels in Korea, which are probably the highest in the world, it created a tremendous opportunity to invest in Korea, where everyone was focusing on that all of Asia had melted down or something. So I think we've seen this enormous renaissance in Brazil. And relative to the world, the values are still undervalued in Brazil. And when you look at countries and the requirements for the 21st century, access to water, access to agriculture, being able to feed your own people, and access to energy and natural resources, and a relatively large population, Brazil has all of these issues going for it. And, probably the world is still skeptical whether this continuization, we can continue with this strong government leadership. And the other question is really the education of the citizens, and whether this potential growth possibilities in Brazil, whether Brazil is able to educate their citizens. I know you've spent some time focused on that educational system.
Yeah, well, we'll be training 20,000 people in the next 2 years for our own needs and our own operations. President Lula, in his 8 years, has doubled the number of technical schools. Most of the talent you need are really, electricians, welders, for all these industries that Brazil is growing into. So, yes, we are running almost full employment. It's at 6.2% unemployment rate, and creating 200,000 jobs a month. We're running full employment. But Brazil is a country like America. We welcome foreigners. You're all welcome, by the way. People love to work in Brazil. Just to give you an example, in one of our power, we're building 3 big coal-fired power plants. We have Italian, Portuguese, Spanish contractors, and higher skilled labor. They love to come to Brazil, and thanks God they're in trouble. Thanks God, lots of Brazilians came to Florida to work in the construction business, skilled carpenters. So for us, I actually had two brothers living here in the States. They moved to Brazil because Brazil is booming, and Brazil welcomes the world. We are the most Western nation among the emerging markets. You should know that we are a melting pot of nations, exactly like you Americans, with one difference. We're upside down in the southern hemisphere. That's the only difference.
So I think the premise is education. Now, one of the challenges for Brazil was just how young the population, the demographic issues in Brazil, and just how young the country was, and therefore the demands on government for the education of the citizens, etc. You want to maybe point that one out to us?
Mike, this graph tells you the whole story. I mean, we were a kindergarten in the 1980. Almost 80% of the population was below 20. And look where we're going to. We're going towards probably, together with India, the best demographic profile. You know, when the labor force, when young Brazilians step into or are able to step into the workforce. Voila! I mean, this is one of the bases for why we see a very clear growth for 10 years. You know, and if you then back it up with gifts of nature, which is these gigantic resources, it's a unique situation. Maybe like you had here in the 1960s, you know, shortly after the Second World War.
Well, in Brazil, in many ways, reminds me of the United States. Now, this tremendous growth spurt we had in the United States in the 19th century, where capital came from Europe and other parts of the world, and the railroad across the country. The building of the ports on the eastern shore of Brazil. On the west, you have the Andes. And so,
insurmountable.
In order to get to Asia, if you're shipping from the east coast of Brazil, if you had a railroad that went across and dropped into the Pacific, or went up to Colombia and then went into the Pacific there, that's another alternative. But the deep ports that you're building to increase efficiency and take the world's largest ships, what is their route to Asia?
Yes, you know, to bridge the distance, you have to go in size. You know, my father used to say if size would be important, the elephant would own the circus. But, you know, in the case of logistics, you need to build size. Size makes the difference. So there's a reference for size, which is Chinamax. Can we show this Chinamax here? This is a Chinamax. This thing is 360 meters long and 65 meters wide. So you can play football from one side to the other, assuming it was flat. But and for which you need a 26-meter draft. So we're building this Brazil's probably the world's most or largest industrial complex. Can we show back the port? To basically handle these gigantic volumes of raw materials that Brazil will be supplying to India, to China, and obviously the rest of the world, because what is spectacular with our resources is that our company's resources is that we are in the 20% lowest cost in the world of what we do. So, you know, don't ask me about future oil price or gold price, and I have my views, but in essence, if you're a low-cost producer, you survive any type of crisis. But infrastructure is the basis for, you know, transforming Brazil from a country that only exports 11% of its GDP to 20, 25, you know, and by saying that, I'm also saying that the Brazil story is a internal demand growth story, which you have to focus on, which in a country that is creating 250,000 jobs, 5% of GDP only in mortgages, so totally unleveraged society. You know, everybody wants a car. Cars. We're hitting 4 million cars sales this year. I was just in Paris with Carlos Goshen from Nissan. He's going to announce a big factory here at our superport, 400,000 cars. And he told me that he sees Brazil consuming 10 million cars by 2020 to 2023, so in the next 13 years. So we're going to multiply by 2.5. So and imagine what comes all with it, all the extra infrastructure you have to build to to support all this massive growth.
Let's step back for a moment and talk about what is a day in the life of Eike. Okay? In other words, we're here in Los Angeles. A lot of people are here from different countries in Asia and Europe. You're down there in Brazil. What is a normal day for you?
Okay. I see myself as an entrepreneur who looks at, somehow I have a pact with Mother Nature, because so I drill and I find things. So you have to have luck.
Now, do you have good geologists? Have you got a good stick? What is your strategy? Because many people in the audience would also like to find things.
Well, you should have come earlier to Brazil. Listen, the 11th bid round for the oil blocks is coming up in September now. So, amigos, if you have a couple of $1 billion in your pockets, come. Obviously, you need some talent, some local talent.
Now, are you willing to take partners in? If many people want to come to Brazil, are you interested in partners? Or should the best way they invest through your stocks?
It is because...
In fact, let's see how some of those stocks have done.
Yes,
we even have a chart on that.
Then we have the chart, Andrea. Let's see the chart. It's a very interesting chart. Everybody brags about performance. Now, this is cost. No. Can I have the chart of the shares?
Well, let's start with cost. Let's talk a little bit about
Yeah. Okay, in MMX, if you invested $10, what does this mean? I didn't understand it.
I think this tells you how much you've got as a return on your money
So
for every dollar. So you've got 10 times your money in 5 years.
Yeah.
In the first one. You have 500 times your money. I'm sure most people here would love to have 500 times your money from that.
Would you?
So I think the question is...
I think, Mike, this is the chart.
Right. If they're going to bet with you, if they're going to invest with you, one of the ways is to invest in your public companies today.
Yes, through the public companies. And I think that the message is to build these gigantic transformational projects. I started, I say 30 years ago, but this new era of Brazil, I started around the year 2000. So it takes a while for you to get licenses for gigantic ports and put all these people together. But I think, and we have today a market cap around $50 billion that we have created in the last 7 years. But the essence is the underlying resources that we take out at extremely low cash cost. I mean, we will produce oil at $16 a barrel. So here, this is the graph. We have $2.3 trillion worth of underlying gold, coal, oil, iron ore assets that we have. Can we show the cost structure, Andrea? See, we're going to be producing oil at $18 a barrel. So, this is, what is it, 85% EBITDA margin. Iron ore at 29, it's today at 180. Coal. So my philosophy, and I only survived building mines around the world because I was a low-cost producer. And so the culture comes from that. So I engineer, I call these idiot-proof assets. They can be delayed. Doesn't matter. You probably have a
well. Let's keep that slide up for just one moment, showing your costs. So, as a low-cost producer, you obviously can withstand a great deal of volatility in the market here. So, let's step back maybe and just review a couple of the points we've made. One, you've had a strength and stability in governments in Brazil that has not existed for a long period of time.
Stability.
And your feeling is the rule of law, the opportunity to invest, that if you discover the asset, that you'll have a chance to participate. Two, the fact that Brazil, the demographics has gone from a very young country to a country that's going to be turning into consumers. As you travel around the world, and I want to get back, Eike, to a normal day for you, besides going out there and finding natural resources, how would you compare and contrast Brazil with China, with India, with Russia today, if we looked at those countries today? How would you compare and contrast them?
Well, China China has a large population, but they don't have the resources, right? Brazil, what strikes me here in America is that Brazil has allowed me, or the private sector, to own state-size assets. You know, a superport like that, in Germany, is state-owned. Obviously, they have a monopolistic part to it, because once you build one, you don't build another one. So, and Brazilian government has allowed the private sector to step into these gigantic, what can I say, Saudi Arabian, Russian oil fields. So, which is, you know, spectacular. Maybe they change the roof in the future, because going back to Standard Oil, you know, governments, when they see individuals creating so much wealth. I'm fortunate to live in a country that has maintained the oil monopoly literally till 2007. You know, with national, world-class size resource potential. 100 billion barrels is the number for Brazil. So we were number 16 in terms of reserves. We stand now at number 3, 4, and the resources. You know, I brought all the Petrobras technicians into my company with 50 years of history. They spent $150 billion decoding the geological code of the Brazilian basins. You know, really, they're the ones who had the expertise, and it has been maintained as a state monopoly for till 2007, when actually OGX, my company, made Brazilians and the world aware of Brazil oil potential. So you know, when you see all these inefficiencies, I love to arbitrage inefficiencies. And you arbitrage inefficiency when you see a small port that, you know, you stop with a 10-meter. It's like trying to move people from New York to Europe on a 737. Well, it won't work. You know, you have to put them into larger aircraft. So get back to logistics. And so voila, Brazil has allowed the private sector, and this is again President Lula vision, and which is Dilma's also. You know, many people think that the Brazilian government wants to nationalize companies, like this action with CVRD, with Vale, when they wanted to change the executive. Listen, I know President Dilma for 8 years, and you know, she loves the animal spirit of entrepreneurs. Last time I was with her, you know, leaving her office, she said to me, Eike, Brazil is going to create many more billionaires like you. Isn't that nice to hear from your government? So whoever who is sitting here...
So we have a lot of people in the audience that are looking forward to going to Brazil today, I think, Eike. In many ways, Brazil does reflect the United States a century ago, 50 years ago, today. And one of the things that excited me, I went looking in the Amazon, particularly focused on agriculture and other elements, is just the tremendous potential for agriculture in Brazil and the opportunity to grow south of the equator, what we've seen most people growing north of the equator.
Yes.
And the technology, I don't think most people are fully familiar with the agricultural technology in Brazil today, and the tremendous capability to produce food. From that standpoint. And I'm assuming that they're going to eventually, if they want to ship that and export it, they're going to have to send it through your ports.
Yes. Sorry.
From that standpoint.
Yeah, and I think, you know, again, going back to the comparison with America, the same way that we in Brazil, we focus on the financial industries, you know, over leveraging financial instruments, and the best talent from schools moved to Wall Street. Something similar happened in Brazil, and the government stopped planning. And so, thanks God. I mean, but the difference between America and Brazil is that here, you know, in New York, if you want to phone somebody if you move from one neighborhood to the other, your phone goes down, right? So in Brazil, I think the mixture between the state regulating and imposing performance or quality, it's something that Americans don't understand well somehow. I have a problem in understanding it. And if you discuss the intelligent grid here that everybody understands, I mean, common sense is that you should implement it. But because of stakeholders in different states, you probably will be fighting for 10 years if you decide to do it today to implement it. Brazil has a centrally dispatched system, which me as an independent producer, I participate in auctions to generate power for the grid. But it's an intelligent grid. So
one of
the comparisons.
One of the things Ike's talking about is the ability to transmit power between states in the United States by being regulated at the state level. I know between Virginia and West Virginia it took almost 12 years to try to figure out how to move power. And so the wind power in North Dakota or the other areas, the ability to move it throughout the country, is an area that Brazil has already recognized.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to the area of why do you believe, even though the tremendous success of Brazil on a relative basis today is somewhat undiscovered by the world? Is it the traffic patterns of airplanes flying? Could it be the language? Could it be the fact that the language of the country is Portuguese? In other words, China has implemented policies whereby 2015, 2018, everyone that graduates high school will have learned to speak English. So they'll be bilingual, at least in Mandarin and English, if not other languages. What do you think this barrier is today?
Well, I mean, I think of the S&P 500 companies, 400 of them are in Brazil. So, but many of the CEOs have stopped to come to Brazil in the last decade or so because of all the problems we had. And so it's a question of people really visiting, understanding the country, understand the revolution that we had even with our executive powers, like the mayor of Rio de Janeiro. He could be an executive of my company. The governor of Rio could be an executive of my company. Brazil, today has 4 potential presidential candidates that I would vote for. And it shows quality. It's very so. Only by visiting it, understanding the size of Brazil, we are, as again, $2 trillion economy with a gigantic pent-up demand, is a place that you have to come and see. It's quite amazing how most people, maybe the media here focused the growth of Asia, and China is so overwhelmingly big, that now it's Asia, Asia, Asia. And yes, language could be also an issue. Although Brazilians, I say entrepreneurs or businessmen are fluent in English at least, and maybe a culture of Brazilians themselves to be, I understand only 23% of Americans have a passport, right?
Well, most Americans have not left the United States.
Yeah, but the same thing for Brazil, because we're somehow an inward-looking country. America has grown through the multinationals, okay? So you have big exposure through the multinationals. Brazilian economy only exporting 11% of its GDP shows you that the Brazilian businessman says, well, I have an internal market. I live from my internal market. So he did not make an effort also to export his products. It's just happening. We have created some champions recently in meat. Free Boy, BR Foods, Pulp and Paper, creating the largest pulp and paper company in the world. But this Anheuser-Busch was bought by a Brazilian group. I bought Burger King. Not that I love hamburgers, but. We bought it with the same friends who bought Anheuser-Busch because we saw lots of value there. Voila.
So I think let's come back to, as you've traveled the world, let's come back to, as you see, comparing and contrasting Brazil, India, Russia today from that standpoint. And if I'm going to physically come to your port, what is the route I'm taking to China and to Asia? Am I going When? Going?
You going through the Cape, down the Cape, South Africa. It's just
And if I'm going to Japan, am I going down?
Also, that's the route. That's the route you would take. So
Now there is not as many direct flights from Brazil to the United States as there are to other countries today, and so part of the effort really has been a lot of activities. First, the multinationals. But do you believe the Olympics and the World Cup are going to change the world's view towards Brazil in the next few years?
I think it has already. Between the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, World Cup, the gigantic oil find that we helped show to the world in 2007, the oil story is $1 trillion story. And then, I think Brazil is... I think our last war was fought 100 years ago. We are known as a very peaceful country, as you know. My plane has a big Brazilian flag on the back, so when I fly in the Middle East, they don't shoot a missile at me. People love soccer, Voila, look at this. So people like... It's an American plane, wonderful American plane.
Well, I do notice, when we had the World Cup here in Los Angeles, that a lot of the people were all rooting for Brazil. The people are full of life, there's enormous spirit, etc. But it still seems in many ways, Eike, that it's undiscovered on a relative basis.
It is. You're absolutely right. Undiscovered.
So if the opportunities are so great, and you do have a number of very large companies in Brazil, I guess what strikes me as an individual is how little competition you've had in building ports, building steel mills.
Good.
At some point, it would seem to me you'd be seeing competition from this standpoint.
Yeah, but the thing is, what we have done, in terms of growth or success, comes from a culture of building things from nothing, using state-of-the-art concepts and equipment. And, I have my 360-degree vision that I would say most CEOs do not.
Well,
really.
I think you should describe that 360-degree.
Okay.
Because most people can only see forward. They can't see.
Yeah, CEOs or wealth creators, entrepreneurs, even CEOs who are there to create wealth for the shareholders should be, if it's a car company, the guy has to have a lot of knowledge about mechanical engineering or look at the new developments in electrical cars or turbines, they has to. And I see that most CEOs do not look at things on a 360-degree. And it's obviously, and we because of my, say, engineering background, I when I speak about people, which are absolutely necessary to create these gigantic transformational projects, you talk about people, it's people and team engineering.
Well, let's take a look at this 360-degree. There's this thing up here called humility. So when you got to be the 8th wealthiest person in the world and you announced that it won't be long before you're the wealthiest person in the world, how does that fit with that
I will tell you.
360-degree?
Okay. We apply something in our company that we call human capitalism. Let me try to explain. When we develop these projects, we take care of something that we call the sustainable integrated approach in relation to our environment, and that means in the social and environmental aspects. So if I have to rebuild the city because it will become an area of influence and help people by doing that, that's what we do. And I spend the money, it's part of my budget. And I think, when I see multinationals that come to Brazil and at the end of the year you see that they spend $100,000, they make $1 billion in profits, but they spend $100,000 in environmental things and social things, I feel very bad about it. So what we do, and that's the reason why I have in the last 7 years obtained 140 environmental licenses for very complex projects. Why is that? Brazil is a country of check and balances. We have something that was created in 1988, which is the Public Attorney's Office. And they're there to protect the people's interest. And when I build a superport like that, of course I'm going to influence the fisherman close to the port. Of course I'm going to influence the life of the neighboring cities. So we go in with people to study the needs of everybody. If it's for insecurity, if it's hospitals, if it's schools, we go there and invest the money before. And obviously, my projects have to pay for it. But as I said in the beginning, the idiot-proof concept comes from the concept of looking at low-cost, rich assets, okay, that can pay for all of that. And what I say today, if you don't have the money to pay for this humane capitalism, don't even develop anything. My German mother, we Brazilians, we Latins, we have this Iberic culture of, it's my grandfather, my father, me, my son, and my grandson. Don't look to the sides. I come from a culture of thinking community. So it's useless for me to be the only rich guy or the couple of rich guys in Brazil. I have no fun in that. So we the reason for the success and for the licensing process that I just explained is a good proof to it. When we go to public hearings, people at the end applaud us because we have taken care of everybody. So it's not foreign companies sometimes come to Brazil and think that the state has to pay it, or the city council. They should be happy that I'm bringing jobs. Wait a minute. You have to. The boundaries are larger. So if you think 360 degrees, you increase your boundaries, and the social and environmental aspect is what we call our sustainable. I have a sustainability director that, for instance, in our resource projects, he go in Colombia, for instance, he goes up and talks to the Indians and sits there. I was surprised a couple of months ago. He was there with an Indian leader that had never received a visit from a white man that has projects in Colombia. Think about this. I mean, it's absolutely insane. So he goes up, spends 2 days with them. He smokes and God knows what, drinks the soups and so on. But we interact, and because we learn so much from them. And they said to us, listen, if you help us preserve this forest here, which is, say, the backbone for the water resources for our areas, you are welcome. You are part of our indigenous community. It's as simple as that. But multinationals, honestly, or even large corporations, their mandate is to bring more profits home, and that has to change, honestly.
So I think we understand that issue. I think we also understand this one over here called passion, Ike. I think we've understood that issue. Now, let's talk about maybe how you've changed. The prices of commodities have gone up substantially. They've had a lot of volatility. Your decision to invest in natural resources has made quite a difference from that standpoint. I want to get kind of back into the day and the life of Ike. How has your life changed from a decade ago?
I was educated in a middle-class family. I'm still middle-class.
So now, does every middle-class family race boats?
No, but
just want to check there.
I was Brazilian, American, and world champion, and I was 34 years old, so this is 20 years ago. And I stopped because I didn't want to die. I stopped. I don't.
Well, your investors are excited about that decision.
I don't race. I wanted to convince my father to race with me, which I failed, of course. But the last thing I did was break a record between Santos and Rio in 2006. But I don't race anymore. It's too dangerous. It's impossible.
Being wealthy in Brazil today, many of us who visit Brazil, particularly the major cities in Brazil, quite often are alerted by those before we go as to security measures, other issues, bulletproof cars, other types of things people move around in. And so ultimately, society at some point plays in any investment. You obviously have invested a lot to try to change some of the more depressed areas of the country. What message would you give to visitors to your country?
First, that we had very high unemployment.
I think if we just spend one moment, I think before you answer the question, if we could turn the lights on for one moment, I'd be interested to see how many people in the audience have ever visited Brazil. So we could just take a 30-second break.
30%? Yeah. Did you like it?
So let's get back to security and issues of security.
High unemployment obviously always means more people, trying to think of silly things. But now at 6.2% unemployment rate, we're hiring everybody that is out there. Number one. Number two, with the economy growing, the state, as I said, the governments and the cities have streamlined the budgets, and they have disposable money to invest in security. I myself, I'm spending $12 million a year to build these specification police units in these slum areas. And the city is coming after with schools and hospitals. So education and so the state is reoccupying the slum areas. And at the end, the city is giving these people the property title. So what has happened?
Why don't we talk for a moment? I'm not sure people from around the world really understand what is a pacification police unit.
Yeah,
what you mean
it's a neighborhood police. It's a neighborhood police that you because before you had these slum areas, they were literally the territory of these drug lords or militias, and they are systematically being occupied. Rio has already occupied 15 of them successfully through intelligence and with the help finally of federal assistance. I mean, obviously the local government, the city, everybody involved, using intelligence to the maximum, listening, hearing, tapping into people's conversations. And voila, if you would have asked me 3 years ago if there would be a solution for the slums in Brazil, I would not know what to tell you. Today, I'm investing, I'm helping this effort because I see the final solution. Because once you give property title to these people, and prices have tripled, quadrupled in some of these areas. But good investments, remember. You create a revolution. Property title is the final magic for the exercise. So a task force, a confrontational police initially, is very prepared and full contact operations. A governor that has accepted to take the political costs for that, and the choice of the right Secretary of Security. Just to give you a notion, that man has, in the last 4 years, he has exonerated 750 police officers. So we were very much like you were here in Al Capone days, 1920s. So we're going through a revolution, and now with the Olympics, with the World Cup, you have all the funds, and the oil that is really right in front of Rio is finally going to make out of Rio the paradise on earth.
Now, when we look at the United States, Eike, over the years, all of our presidents have suggested that the United States would become energy independent. Probably the most emotional appeal was made by President Carter, who stated after President Nixon and after President Ford that we would never import more energy in the United States than we did before. And President Carter, I remember myself how vividly he went on television telling us discovering oil, drilling oil, was a moral equivalent at that point in time, and that we should all go out and find oil and for America to become independent. Well, the United States has never done it. So when you talk about drilling off Rio, many people in the United States think drilling off the coast of California and many of these other things, that there's probably very large deposits, but in the United States we really aren't. And we're still living with a vivid memory of the issues that occurred in the Gulf of Mexico here. How have you balanced that in Brazil? What are government policies restricting or encouraging the search for natural resources?
Well, we are self-sufficient in energy. Huh? So if you look at Petrobras and...
In fact, when we look at the price here, if we go back to that slide you had on the price of oil that you had up a second ago, and you could see here that many of us have felt that because there was no type of support for oil, you can see in that period of time that spike that occurred here in the early 1980s, late 1970s, when President Carter had called for this to occur and President Reagan came into office. But the fact that the price had dropped so significantly, many of the firms that went out there drilling had higher cost and did not survive that 20-year or so period of time. So as we look at that graph here today, you can see here how little the price moved for such a long period of time.
Yes, but then read this here. During the 20th century, the world's urban population quadrupled. Very important. Military capacity increased by a factor of 50 per capita, and technology surged 80-fold. And now, while energy capacity per person merely doubled. Voila, the problem. And if you count another billion or 2 billion people entering the consumer world, where's the energy going to come from? And if in Brazil, if we're tapping, when you speak about ultra-deep waters, we're talking about OGX works in shallow waters, 130 meters depth. We were lucky. Again, you need luck to create these things. But
I saw that on the 360 chart that there was one of those things that said luck.
Yeah. Petrobras, though, is going to the moon by going, 2,000 meters water depths, another 5,000 meters down, crossing a salt layer. Still material challenges, you have to engineer certain type of alloys for this to be productive and last for at least 20 years, the equipment. These are all gigantic challenges. That's where we have to look for oil. I have to show our small our oil production. Can I show you a small, short video? Yes, Andrea, can we show the OGX oil? 2 minutes and 10 seconds. Andrea, will it work?
In the Campos Basin in the accumulation called Waimea, located in block BMC 41, approximately 85 kilometers from the coast of the state of Rio de Janeiro at a water depth of 130 meters. Well, OGX 26, the first producing well, will enter into production through a system called Extended Well Test, EWT, with up to 20,000 barrels of oil per day, followed by a production pilot test. The well has already been drilled with a total depth of 4,746 meters and a horizontal segment of 1,000 meters within the carbonate reservoir. The drilling of horizontal wells is a technique that is widely used in the petroleum industry to increase the area of the reservoir open for production. In order to maximize production, the well was stimulated with a method called selective acidification, distributing acid at 8 intervals previously selected along the length of the entire horizontal segment. Both the drilling of the first horizontal well as well as the selective acidification demonstrate the great technical and execution capacity of OGX. Both operations were conducted without abnormalities and with excellent results, such as the very high production indexes and the confirmation of the production potential of 40,000 barrels per day of oil with gravity of approximately 20 degrees API. The OGX-26 will be equipped for production with electric submersible pumping, which works with an electric pump installed at the bottom of the well and a wet Christmas tree, which is an apparatus consisting of valves and sensors installed on the bottom of the sea, allowing for total control of production. The wet Christmas tree will be interconnected with the FPSO OSX-1 production unit through flexible lines to pump out the oil produced, and with the electric hydraulic umbilical line which will control the electric pump installed at the bottom of the well, as well as the wet Christmas tree. The FPSO OSX-1 has a mooring system called the disconnectable turret, which allows for its prior installation and hooking up of the well before the FPSO arrives on site. This well provides the initial framework of the projects for the development of production of the large accumulations discovered so far by OGX.
So, Eike, we have enormous example of use of technology there in this effort here. And the reserves in this particular well?
Well, in this Campos area, we have, in total, we're estimating 7 billion barrels of oil that we're going to be taking out for around $18 a barrel. Now, what is unique in the world, I don't think that you have an example in the world where an oil company has found so much oil, in 3 years, 4 years. We started with a potential billion barrels. We now have a total of discovered of 10.8, that has decided to go also into the oil equipment facility. We're building in our superport, the world's largest shipyard with Hyundai, which are the largest guys in the world. And we're going to deploy 20 FPSOs, 100,000 barrels a day each, They will be up to 70% standardized. And what will be unique in the world, and maybe we remember in the next time we come here, in the future with this production being rolled out, because it's shallow waters, known technology, one owner owns majority of the oil company and controls the shipyard that has received a $30 billion order. So this shipyard is existing because of a $30 billion order book. We save between the drilling phase and final production, which is normally takes 8 years, we can do in between 3 and 4 years. So let's remember this in a couple of years. So hopefully people will say, well, the reference is OSX, not whoever other company.
So let's step back and review where we've been. 1, the tremendous growth possibilities of Brazil. 2, the need for infrastructure that you focused on. 3, the enormous natural resources of Brazil. And 4, the ability to ship them and the increase in the consuming as the country ages and grows here too.
Pent-up demand, consumer pent-up demand.
So therefore, this is taking a lot of your energy to focus on this today. Tell us a little bit about how you've built your management team to deal with all these issues.
Yeah, I was fortunate to build this in a country like Brazil, because Brazil was built through the brasses, Petrobras, wonderful, great company. They send their technical people to the United States to study, or around the world to get the best technologies and the best knowledge. And so they did for the electrical sector with Electrobras, Portobras ports. So I could draw from a gigantic talent pool of Brazilians. If you would ask me to deploy this in Africa, I would have a problem. Brazil, as a country of 200 million people, was basically built through these state-controlled companies. If you would have taken a picture of Brazil in 1994, probably 70-80% of Brazil's economy was government control. People don't realize that. Today it's inverse, okay? So it's the talent pool really comes from the creation of these state-owned companies.
So Eike, let's talk about the potential risk What are you focused on in terms of potential risk? One, you've spoken here today about being a low-cost producer, so volatility in price could drive your stock price down, could drive the price you're getting in the short run down, but you've essentially made a long-term investment in infrastructure, natural resources, etc. What are the risks that you're focused on?
Well, we obviously, safety for whoever works in our operations is a daily issue. You know, we comply with the highest standards in the world. We're actually proud of it. So safety for people who work for us in these offshore drilling. We have 5,000 men that operate in our 8 oil rigs, between the men who are really operating the drilling units and the supply ships that go up and down. So 5,000. So security is an issue. Keep training people, getting the best that there is, and you know, my concept has always been marginal assets we sell, idiot-proof assets we keep.
What did the BP oil spill in the Gulf, did it change anything you're doing? Has your company focused any differently because of that? And if we look at Brazil's history, has Brazil had a history of any, quote, natural disaster that's occurred from drilling, mining, etc.? We're well aware of some of the challenges in the Amazon that have occurred, but do we have anything we could point to on how Brazil has reacted in the past to an issue similar to the BP?
Yeah, you just check your procedures, and just for the record, immediately after that accident, we had to renew our insurance policy in OGX, and the pool of insurers in London gave us a 10% discount on the insurance policy because of our procedures. It's like, you know, nuclear reactors have to have, you know, several levels of contingency measures that we have, including the manager on top of the plant can't shut down a $200 million drill well that is being drilled. They have 30 years experience, and he has the mandate. They don't need to call me or wake me up to shut it down. He has the mandate to shut down a well. This is just one of the safety procedures. And obviously equipment has to be, you know, state of the art and latest generation. You don't save on these things. Machines need care. You know, you have to take care of.
Let's switch in the last few minutes a little bit to personal. Your personal life, obviously, as the wealthiest individual in your country, you find you in the magazines, the newspapers, the television today, and how have you adjusted your personal life? And when you announce to the world that you're going to be the wealthiest person in the world, how does that come to play?
Yeah. Well, listen, as I tried to tell you before, Brazilian, maybe Catholic background, people did not want to show the wealth that they were creating, or they hid it. Many Brazilians made their money by being contractors to government-controlled entities or companies. And I made it a mission to basically help a new generation of Brazilian entrepreneurs to create it in a transparent way. Like, you know, our 5 companies are listed in the Bovespa, they call it the new market, which complies with the highest standards of governance in Brazil, which is actually, I think, an admired model. Decisions between companies, in my companies, are done, the decisions are made by independent boards, you know, so we comply with all that. So transparency, it's part of my wealth creation, is the transparency we have shown in Brazil to all levels of government, because, as I said, you need licenses, you go to public hearings, you have the public attorney's office. By the way, you know, when our projects, that most of them are under construction, we send the public attorney's office a monthly progress report of what we're doing. So we show everything. It's total open kimono, fellows. So, you know, my mission I see as showing young Brazilians that, listen, be proud of what you're creating. And somebody has had to put up the nose and show that it's possible. That's what I'm doing. So this game of, once you're a racer, or once you go into competing, you probably never get it out of your blood, right? So I have to compete with Mr. Slim. You know, I don't know if I'm going to pass him on the right or the left side, but I'm going to pass him.
Now, Eike, when I go to Iguazu Falls and see those millions of gallons of fresh water pouring back into the ocean, or you go to the Amazon and just see the enormous amount of water, one of the tremendous advantages Brazil has is access to water. Have you looked at projects that you might be able to figure out what you're going to do with that fresh water that's coming back and going back into the sea?
Yeah, Brazil's water wells is channeled into agriculture, no, or cattle farming. Largest meat export in the world today. So it's meat is lots of concentrated water somehow, but not really. I mean, farming. It's, to give you an idea, OGX has 230. It's an intelligence cell of 230 people. We have a market cap of, I don't know, $34–35 billion. Quite unique, isn't it? And we want to keep. We like the low. We like the intelligence model. It's been working well. So all that water is for farming. And I'm of the, see. I think on the last panel we mentioned about the pink swan for America. I think shale gas here is a reality. It will help America lower its dependence. It's a fact. And then second, the next revolution will come on carbon, not sequestration, but the carbon use, the CO2 from our coal-fired power plants or gas-fired power plants are going to be the raw materials to produce biodiesel. We're on the verge of that revolution. So we're going to coal-fired power plants, and America has 50% of its power comes from coal power. You have 300 years of reserves. The Chinese have 300 years of reserves. 70% of their power base is coal. We will be seeing very soon zero CO2 emission coal and gas-fired power plants. This is a revolution, and be producing biodiesel.
So we have a couple of minutes left. I'd like you to change jobs now, Eike. I'd like you to become the Minister of Tourism for Brazil. And if we all wanted to go to Brazil, what are we going to do? Where are we going to travel? What should we be seeing in your country?
Yeah, well, I think our international public relation in relation to Brazil was inverse to the quality of our soccer. Okay, that's why you haven't come.
So let me just, as the soccer team was better, less people came, or are they correlated?
No, we are extremely good in soccer, but we're miserable in marketing Brazil.
Okay.
Right?
That's why we've made you the Minister of Tourism today.
Okay, I see. But I mean, of course, Rio is going to host the Olympics and the World Cup. I think. By the way, I just signed a deal. I'm going to be the exclusive seller of the tickets. So if you want to, you have to talk to me if you want for the World Cup. Okay. Yours are reserved.
Now so you're in charge of all tickets for the World Cup and the Olympics?
No, not the Olympics, for the World Cup 2014. Yes. And well, Rio, Brazil's Itaipu Dam. Itaipu was built 40 years ago and generates 14,000 megawatts. You know, everybody speaks of the world press about the Three Gorges Dam, which is 18,000 megawatts. But Itaipu was built 40 years ago. It's an engineering marvel. Actually, it's 1 kilometer long, you know. If you shoot a bullet, it won't get the other end. 14,000, 40 years ago. So Brazilian engineering companies have done gigantic undertaking. So when people are worried about the stadiums that are to be built for the Olympics and so on, I'm not worried at all. We need legislation. We need to modernize our airports, because our airports are as backwards as our ports. But again, I consider that a sweet problem. This investment opportunity. Many international airport operators are looking at Brazil to bid for the concessions of the Rio Airport, São Paulo Airport, many other million people airports that are going to receive the World Cup event. Come. The message really is come. The Olympics have put Brazil on the map. The oil has put Brazil on the map. GE, the big corporations, GE, IBM and Cisco, I think Cisco, are building research centers in Brazil, which is a proof of how much not only they realize that Brazil respects intellectual property, because we do, otherwise people wouldn't be building research centers in Brazil, but it shows you that they want to be part of this growth.
I think the world, general public, greatly underestimates the use of technology skill that Brazil has. And in closing today, now that Eike has become the Minister of Tourism from Brazil, I know we have a number of pictures of Brazil that you have. Maybe we could run a few of them. And I want to thank you for joining us today, and a few images maybe of Brazil as we end. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me. Thank you.